I never thought it would happen to me. For nearly a decade, I poured everything I had into that company. Early mornings, late nights, missed birthdays, skipped vacations. While others took credit for the smallest wins, I stayed in the background, building systems, fixing problems, making things run without ever asking for applause. I thought loyalty mattered. I thought hard work protected you. But the truth? In corporate America, loyalty is just a line in the handbook, and hard work is only praised when it serves someone else's narrative. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of Thursday where nothing feels off. A coffee in hand, I walked into the office building like always, past the security desk, the elevators, the fake plants I always hated. I greeted the receptionist with a soft smile. I even helped a new intern find the right conference room. Everything seemed normal. Until it wasn't. At 10:47 a.m., I received a calendar invite. Meeting with HR. Subject: realignment discussion. I felt my chest tighten. Now, I'm not stupid. I'd been in those meetings before, but always on the other side. Helping restructure, delivering the bad news, even comforting others after. But something about this invite was different. My name wasn't listed as an organizer. I wasn't being asked to lead. I was being summoned. I walked into the glass-walled conference room, heart thudding. The head of HR sat there with her corporate smile. Next to her, Jason, my direct supervisor. His gaze avoided mine. That was when I knew. "We're so sorry," she began, the script already rolling off her tongue. "Due to unforeseen budget constraints and a strategic shift in direction, your position has been made redundant. This is not a reflection of your performance." I stared at her. Not a reflection of my performance? I had built that department from scratch. I'd trained the very people now replacing me. I had fixed what Jason broke time and time again. And now, I was being discarded like I was nothing more than a budget line. "Your severance package has been emailed. We ask that you vacate the premises by end of day," she continued. I didn't speak. I just nodded slowly. My face didn't betray me, but inside, I was on fire. Betrayal. Humiliation. But also something else. Because there was one thing they didn't know. They didn't know I owned the building. Not directly, of course. That would have been too obvious. My name didn't show up on the lease agreements or the utility bills. The company rented 4 floors of this building from a property management firm. What no one realized was that the firm was mine through a series of shell companies and trusts. I had bought the building 3 years ago, in silence, long before the pandemic hit, back when real estate was still undervalued in this part of the city. They never knew they were walking through halls I owned. Using elevators I paid to maintain. Holding their secretive HR meetings in conference rooms whose lighting systems I upgraded myself. So I packed my things slowly. And as I carried the box down the hallway, passing people who couldn't meet my eyes, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. They'd soon know. Not because I'd tell them, but because life has a funny way of showing people exactly who they tried to step on. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into my property management dashboard. Rent payments, maintenance requests, lease expirations, everything was neatly in order. I clicked on the lease for the company that just let me go. 3 years left on the agreement. They were paying top market rates. And guess what? They had no clause for early termination. I smiled. A quiet, tired smile. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about reclaiming something they tried to take from me. My dignity. My worth. My power. They thought I was just another employee, a dispensable asset. But I was much more than that. I was their landlord. Still, I didn't act. Not yet. You see, power is best used slowly like a chess game. You don't win by flipping the board. You win by moving one piece at a time. 3 days later, I received an email. It was from Jason. Subject: would love your insights on a few lingering projects. I nearly laughed out loud. No apology. No acknowledgement of what happened. Just a veiled attempt to extract more from me, like they hadn't just thrown me out with the trash. I ignored it. And the next one. And the one after that. But something shifted in me. I started remembering everything. Every slight, every stolen idea, Every time I was talked over, dismissed, gaslit. All the promotions that never came. The bonuses mysteriously cut in half. The fake smiles, the empty promises. It all came back like a flood. But this time, I wasn't powerless. And I wasn't planning on staying silent anymore. The office felt different the moment I walked in on Monday morning. Not because of any change in decor or the usual hustle of employees, but because I had changed. Over the weekend, I'd signed the final papers. The building was officially mine. And while no one in that office had the slightest clue, I walked the halls with a new sense of gravity in every step. I wasn't just another laid-off employee trying to hold it together. I was the owner of the very space they took for granted. My first stop wasn't the front desk or even my old cubicle. It was the security room. I introduced myself to Glenn, the building's longtime security guard. He barely looked up from his monitors. I could tell he'd seen his fair share of corporate drama. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice rough from too much black coffee and not enough sleep. "Yes," I replied, sliding a folded letter across the desk. "You'll want to read that carefully." He looked up, brow furrowed, and unfolded the letter. A copy of the ownership documents and a note authorizing me to make personnel changes and request full access to security feeds. He whistled low. "So, you're the new landlord?" "Exactly." And just like that, the balance shifted. I asked him for copies of recent visitor logs, particularly any involving late-night activity. Part of me was curious, not just about what went on after hours, but about how much the company used the building for backdoor dealings. I was beginning to realize that this layoff wasn't just about budgets or downsizing. It was personal, and I needed to know why. Next, I visited maintenance. Joe, the head janitor, looked surprised when I introduced myself. "You? The new owner?" "I am," I nodded. "And you've done a damn good job keeping this place running. I hope we can continue working together." He grinned and gave me a solid handshake. Joe, unlike the executives upstairs, appreciated honesty and hard work. I could tell I'd have no trouble winning him over. After making a few more rounds and introducing myself to key staff, not as the ex-employee they laid off, but as their new landlord, I took the elevator to the top floor. That's where things got interesting. The executive suite hadn't changed. Same glass walls, same expensive furniture. But as I stepped into the reception area, Meredith, the assistant who had once barely glanced at me, nearly dropped her phone. I thought you were laid off," she stammered. I replied calmly, "but now I'm here for something else." "Do you have an appointment?" "No need. I'm the owner of the building now. You can let Martin know I'm here." She blinked, then buzzed the CEO's office. Seconds later, the door opened. Martin stood there, his expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. "What the hell are you doing here?" I stepped in, cool and collected. "Making sure my tenants are taking good care of the property." He laughed, though it sounded forced. "You're joking." "I never joke about real estate." We sat across from each other, a table between us that now felt more like a chessboard than a meeting space. He tried to regain control, talking about how the company was considering relocating, how this building no longer fit their vision. I listened, sipping the complimentary water. Then I leaned forward. "You should know something, Martin. I've reviewed the lease agreement. And as it turns out, the renewal clause kicks in automatically next month unless you give 90 days notice. You missed the deadline. Which means..." He stared at me, the reality sinking in. "You're locked in for another year. At the updated rate." Martin's jaw tightened. "You can't do that." "I can. I already did." He stood up, pacing. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you thought I was disposable. Because I gave everything to this company and you discarded me like office trash. But now, you work in my building." For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was fear. I stood up and headed to the door. "Oh, and one more thing," I said before leaving. "Maintenance tells me your suite's plumbing needs work. I'll be sending someone up. Hope you don't mind a little drilling during your next board meeting." I walked out with a grin. For the next few weeks, I continued to make subtle changes. I approved new signage for the building lobby with my name discreetly listed as the property owner. I upgraded lighting in the conference rooms, installed more security cameras, and even added a suggestion box. Not for the company, but for me. I wanted the real people, the employees, to know their voices mattered to someone. Employees began to notice. I got nods in the hallway, whispers, an email here, and they're thanking me for the new break room chairs or the free vending machine I installed in the lobby. The divide was growing. The executive team stayed bitter, their egos bruised. But the staff? They were warming to the quiet force that now lived in the building's bones. Then came the company's annual event, a networking night, hosted in the rooftop lounge, a space technically owned by me. I RSVP'd, and I showed up in style. Gone were the slacks and polo shirts. I wore a tailored suit, stepped out of a sleek black car, and was greeted at the door by Glenn, now very much on my side. Inside, the reaction was electric. Some tried to pretend I wasn't there. Others gawked. But the real moment came when the keynote speaker, none other than Martin, took the stage. He cleared his throat, gave his usual spiel about innovation and adaptation. But when he made a comment about owning your path, I raised my glass. To ownership, I said aloud. He faltered, eyes locking with mine. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. I didn't need a microphone. My presence said enough. When I got up that Monday morning, something felt different. Not in the outside world. The sun still shone with the same indifference to human storms. The traffic still roared across the asphalt like an untamed beast, and life went on in its usual rush. But inside me, something had shifted. I was no longer the same woman who had been humiliated and dismissed without warning. I was someone who understood the value of strategic silence and the power of well-calculated patience. That week, I returned to the old company as the new owner of the building. I walked through the same glass doors where I used to swipe my badge with a quiet sigh, but now, instead of a uniform and an ID, I wore confidence. I greeted the receptionist, the same one who used to ignore me in the hallways. She nearly fell out of her chair when she saw me next to the property administrator. "The new owner would like to see the technical room on the 4th floor," he said, as casually as if he were talking about changing a light bulb. "Owner," she repeated, choking on the consonants. I walked right past her. The manager who had signed my dismissal came to meet me, confused, trying to keep his composure in the face of these new facts. I knew he was trying to understand how a former employee now walked with authority. "Can we talk?" he asked, tense. "Of course," I replied with a polite smile. "But first, I need to check some structural conditions in the building. After all, I'm considering important changes." The rumor spread like wildfire. Every step I took echoed like a gavel against someone's ego. I didn't shout. I didn't wave documents in anyone's face. I simply let the facts speak. And oh, how they spoke. That afternoon, I called a meeting with the tenants. I said I was reviewing contract conditions and that new policies would soon be implemented. The manager's face went pale. He knew he was now at the mercy of the new owner. But what I truly wanted wasn't revenge for the pain they caused. It was justice. And justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it enters silently and redecorates the room with lessons. In the days that followed, I observed the company's departments closely. It felt like revisiting a past life, but with the eyes of someone who had survived the shipwreck and was now sailing her own ship. I saw former coworkers who used to smile falsely now lower their eyes when they saw me. But, curiously, I also saw those who hugged me sincerely, happy for my rise. It was in that context that I met Leandro. Leandro was the building's maintenance chief. A simple man, but with a quiet intelligence. We crossed paths in the corridors, and he, not knowing who I was, said to me, "This place has potential, but it needs care. If someone invests wisely, this building could become a reference point." I smiled. For the first time, someone saw the space with the same eyes I did. We talked at length that day. We discussed renovations, the importance of preserving the soul of a place even when the facade changes. I realized he cared for the building like one cares for a home. I didn't see just an employee, I saw an ally. In the following weeks, I got closer to Leandro. He was practical, honest, and observant. I found out he supported his elderly mother and 2 younger siblings. He never complained. He just did his job with dignity. It was inevitable. I decided to promote him to general supervisor of building maintenance. He cried when he heard the news. And inside, so did I. At the same time, I made the decision many had anticipated. I notified the company that their lease would not be renewed at the end of the current term. They would have 90 days to find a new location. The shock was widespread. The manager came to me again, this time without arrogance. "This is going to hurt us a lot. Are you sure about this?" I looked into his eyes, remembering all the times he had treated me like I was invisible. When I was dismissed, "Were you sure about your decision?" He lowered his head. No answer. No apology. In the months that followed, I watched the company gradually move out. They were intense days, but not painful, because now I owned the narrative. And more importantly, I owned myself. That building, which had once reminded me of humiliation, now symbolized my reconstruction. I renovated every floor, modernized the elevators, painted the walls with vibrant colors. Where there had once been shadows, I placed light. Leandro helped me with everything. And in that process, I realized something more was blooming between us. It wasn't just a professional partnership. It was connection. It was care. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to see him not just as a dedicated worker, but as someone who might find space in my heart. Meanwhile, the former colleagues were now working in a makeshift warehouse on the city's outskirts. No air conditioning. No infrastructure. Many reached out to me, some asking for jobs, others offering apologies. I replied to them all with cordiality, but never submission. Because when life turned its back on me, I learned to walk alone. And so, from the pain of unemployment, a new era was born. An era in which I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Where my story stood tall on its own pillars. Where every brick of that building carried the memory of a woman who had been underestimated and who rose beyond anyone's expectations. But the best was yet to come. Because what started with a dismissal would become something even more powerful, the building of a legacy that no one could ever take away from me. When Luna walked through the gates of the building where her former company still operated, the world seemed to have changed its color. There was no hesitation in her steps, no trace of doubt in her gaze. Dressed in a dark overcoat and a vibrant red scarf, she walked like someone who knew every tile of that floor, and who now carried a truth the others had yet to discover. She was no longer just the employee who had been humiliatingly fired. She was the owner of the building. And now, the new owner of the company. The story of the share purchase spread through the corridors like fire through dry straw. No one knew exactly what had happened, only that Luna's name now appeared in board meetings, that an elegant lawyer with a French accent was frequently seen entering and exiting the company, and that the looks once filled with disdain now lowered when she passed. But Luna had no time for theatrical revenge. Her energy was focused elsewhere, rebuilding a broken culture, giving voice to the invisible, reforming processes, reassessing goals. She knew what it was like to be on the other side, and decided her leadership would be built on empathy, not fear. However, the former CEO, Daniel Marchesi, did not take the fall lightly. Since the silent acquisition, he had been searching for a way back into power. He sought support in the market, looking for allies among investors. He tried to manipulate board members with promises of astronomical returns. He even considered filing a lawsuit claiming undue influence, a flimsy allegation but noisy. Luna, however, remained calm. She watched, calculated. Then she made the most unexpected move of all. She invited Daniel to lunch. They sat face to face in a sophisticated restaurant downtown, with wide windows and silent waiters. "So, this is how you plan to humiliate me?" he began, not even glancing at the menu. Luna kept her gaze steady. "I'm not here for that, Daniel. I came to offer something better than a fight." He laughed with disdain. What kind of proposal could come from someone who hid for years that she owned the walls we worked in? She leaned in slightly. "A proposal to start over. with transparency, with a restructuring plan that preserves what's good about the company, eliminates what stifles creativity, and restores dignity to the people. I want you with me, but not in command. I want your intelligence, your experience. I want you as a mentor to the new generation. He looked at her, surprised. Pride froze his reply for several long seconds. Why would you do that? Why give me this chance? Because I don't want to become like you, she said. Because power only has value when it's used to rebuild what was broken. The proposal lingered in the air for days. Daniel didn't respond right away, but something inside him had been stirred. The sting of pride still burned, but so did a slow-growing flicker of admiration. Meanwhile, Luna pressed forward with her transformation agenda. She launched training programs for women, especially from the cleaning and reception staff. She created an internal fund to support employees with innovative projects. She set up a private listening room for anonymous internal complaints, but not everyone welcomed her. Some of the old directors saw her as a threat, and they formed a quiet group that began sabotaging small operations. A meeting rescheduled at the last minute. A lost report. A contract that mysteriously disappeared from a desk. Luna recognized the pattern. And once again, she didn't confront it head-on. She simply hired an external, silent, and thorough audit team, one that had worked for major multinationals, and waited. Meanwhile, across the city's business circles, a new rumor began to spread. Luna, the former employee who was fired, was being considered for a seat on a coalition for urban innovation policy. Her name was starting to gain traction outside the corporate bubble. But Luna knew the past always finds a way to return. And it did. On a rainy night, through a handwritten letter left at her door. It was from Clara, the intern who had been publicly humiliated by Daniel years ago, and who had disappeared from the company the next day. The letter was simple, but filled with emotion. Luna, I heard what happened. Thank you for doing what I never could. Thank you for not letting the small voices be forgotten. One day I hope to see you again. Clara. Luna held the paper tightly. A vivid memory crossed her mind. The day she saw Clara crying alone in the bathroom after that meeting. And how she herself had cried there so many times before deciding to take action. Now, she was taking it. But the story wasn't over yet. A report from the audit landed on her desk 2 weeks later. Names, dates, acts of sabotage. And among them, one name she never expected, Louisa, her old friend from the planning team. Louisa, who had cried with her after the firing, who had promised loyalty when she learned Luna was now a shareholder, was listed in the report as the mentor behind 2 internal data breach incidents. The blow was personal. Luna took days to process it. Spent sleepless nights replaying every conversation with Louisa. Tried to justify it, rationalize it, understand it. But in the end, she chose to act as a leader. And as a woman who no longer allowed herself to be wounded in silence. She called Louisa in for conversation. She entered with her eyes downcast, already knowing she had been found out. But she said nothing. She waited. Why, was all Luna asked. I thought, Louisa began, her voice trembling. I thought you were going too far. That you'd forget who you were. That you'd leave us behind. And you decided to sabotage me to keep me close? I was afraid. You shone so brightly. Luna took a deep breath. There was no anger in her face, only exhaustion. I forgive you, Louisa, but I can't keep you here. Your path has to continue elsewhere. And with that, she closed the chapter. That night, alone in her apartment overlooking the city, Luna poured herself a glass of wine. Not as celebration, but as recognition that growth sometimes means letting people go. Even those who once held your hand. She looked out the window. The world was quiet. But within her, a new chapter was already being written. The headquarters lights were still on. It was 1 a.m, and I still hadn't left. The room where it all began, the small glass room at the back of the 3rd floor, was now my main office. On the door, with no ostentation, just my name engraved discreetly. S. Delmar. Ownership and strategic vision. An ambiguous title, subtle enough to go unnoticed, yet powerful enough for any executive to know better than to underestimate me. Since the revelation that I was the true owner of the building where the company operated, the gears of the corporate dynamic had shifted. Marcus's fall was only the beginning of a series of silent, calculated, and above all, irreversible transformations. Like a snake shedding its skin, the corporation was changing. But the venom remained, hidden in the hallways where egos entangled with numbers. In the following months, I kept a low profile. I continued to frequent the building, sometimes invisibly, sometimes as a shadow in the boardroom. I no longer needed a badge to move around. A glance was enough, and doors would open. The company now rented not only the physical space, but also the illusion of control. My goal was clear: to redefine power. With Marcus's dismissal and the gradual departure of other executives aligned with his toxic vision, a unique opportunity arose to transform the company's culture, not with speeches, but with concrete actions. I began silently: real benefit guarantees for employees, structural renovations that prioritized worker well-being, rest areas, a meditation room, a cafeteria with subsidized healthy food. Small gestures that seemed cosmetic, yet planted the seed of a new consciousness. Resistance, of course, was predictable. The old partners, though disgraced, still held shares and connections. I was summoned to an extraordinary meeting with the remaining board members. They wanted to understand who this new player was, the one subtly influencing decisions, pushing for a more transparent culture, demanding ethics where cynicism had once reigned. I walked into the room with a black folder in hand. Every document inside was a testament to what they had chosen to ignore: contracts, covered-up irregularities, data manipulation, and most of all, proof of the internal abuse Marcus had allowed. I looked each of them in the eye before saying, "I could use this against you, but I'd rather offer a choice: renewal or resistance. You decide what legacy your names will carry." The silence that followed was heavy, but most got the message. 3 resigned. 2 tried to resist, and ended up bought out by investment funds aligned with the new vision. The ones who truly believed in rebuilding stayed. Meanwhile, my bond with the employees deepened. I rehired Samira, now as head of a new division: personal development and well-being. The woman who had once been fired for not fitting the culture was now a living symbol of transformation. I watched her walk the halls with firm steps and serene eyes. She looked at me and smiled, like someone who knows the universe turns, and sometimes it turns in our favor. "I never thought I'd return to this place with pride. And now you'll never leave because of anyone else's decision," I replied. The team's stories began to emerge. The secretary who was afraid to report an abusive manager. The intern who had been exploited beyond limits. The receptionist who endured veiled advances. With the new, autonomous and confidential whistleblowing channel, those voices finally began to echo. The company was no longer the same. Neither was I. One afternoon, I received an envelope with no sender. Inside, just a single sheet of paper with a handwritten sentence. "You won without ever needing to raise your voice. That's real power." The handwriting was Marcus's. I recognized it by the curve of the S and the signature he tried to erase in the corner. Maybe he was trying to make peace with himself. Or maybe he just wanted me to know that he knew. I placed the paper in a drawer and didn't reply. Some stories deserve silence as an answer. The next morning, a young intern knocked on my door. She was nervous, holding a resume in her hands, as if she still couldn't believe she was allowed to speak with me. "Mr. Delmar, may I ask you a strange question? The strange ones are usually the most important. Is it true you once worked here and got fired?" I smiled, took a deep breath. Yes. But back then, I didn't yet know that losing a job could be the beginning of something greater. She nodded, smiling back. "Thank you for that. It's inspiring to know." She left, and I was alone with the echo of my own journey. On the outside, everything seemed back to normal. But I knew something had changed, not just in the building or the people, but in me. I was no longer an invisible employee. I had become the architect of my own destiny. At the building's entrance, Where once there had been a cold, impersonal corporate sign, now stood a new plaque. Discreet, elegant, but full of meaning. Resilience Tower. Because in the end, it wasn't about having been fired or about buying the building. It was about never again letting anyone be underestimated just because no one knows their story.